Hello everyone and welcome to Janet's Craft Corner. Today I'm going to be doing both our Santa and Mrs. Claus ornaments. Now these ornaments are new ornaments in our shop and I think you'll enjoy them. But I am going to start with, I've already done my white. This is kind of my normal pattern. I've already done my white because I do my white all on Monday so that I don't have to wait on it to dry in between. But today we're going to start with, this is Ceram Coat Rosy Beige. There's a full listing of colors that I'm using in the description to the video or the blog post. And then we're going to start by painting our faces everywhere. And we're going to actually use a sponge for some of them because they've got eyes and noses and all of those fun little things. So let's start with that. So each Santa has a facial area here, and they've got pieces that go over them in white, so I don't have to worry about whether I'm inside the lines or not. Around them in white, I guess I should say. So I don't have to worry about being inside the lines. I just have to worry about getting my paint on there. Okay, there's our Santa. We've got our noses too. Oh, no, miss our noses. They're both sitting up here. Now, Mrs. Claus, first of all, we have more ornaments than we have in Santa. We only have 2 ornaments with Santa, but we have 4 ornaments with Mrs. Claus. And we have more detail on her face, so we're going to have to do a little bit more work. And in this case, on this one, the mouthpiece, or the headpiece, is next to the body, is attached to the body. There's no headpiece that goes over the top of this one, so we'd be a little careful down there on those edges too, because there is a white piece that goes there, but it doesn't, as you can tell, it doesn't go, it's not real thick, so we do have to paint our red below there, so we've got to be careful not to get our skin tone color down into that area. And her hair, and there's a piece that is a piece of holly that's in her hair, headband with holly in it. Those areas are all up the top, so we can just, we don't have to worry about going all the way up to our edge up there. Again, in this case, we have some noses and some hands, so we'll get those here. The advantage to the sponge painting method is that, number 1, your details show through, as you can see up there. And number 2, little pieces like these noses and these hands don't get it down on their edges. Whereas if you tried to paint this with a brush, you'd probably end up with quite a bit on the edges. And most of these faces have drawn eyebrows, but not engraved. And that the reason I do that is that the engraving wants to fill, and so I try to remember to change it to an outline, and you can fill it with paint later using a paintbrush. Using a paintbrush or a acrylic marker is usually actually easiest to use, but it'll keep from filling down in. And in Mrs. Claus's case, probably most of that needs to be white, would be my assumption, but I may not be right. Wouldn't you think so? Okay, but one of these that I didn't catch that on, and but I promise if you order these, I will catch it, and they will not be engraved. They will be outlined just like these are. And you can leave them just like this, outlined like that, or you can fill them in with one of your paint markers or your paintbrush. And you can fill them in whatever color you want. This one has them engraved, and I'm going to show you why I dislike the engraving, because I'm going to have to try really hard here to keep I have to be really, really careful to be really, really light across those, because it tends to fill down in engraving, because the engraving is a thicker cut into the wood than the normal scoring is. And so you have to be very careful across those. Getting lucky so far, but it is right at the moment luck, because I almost never make it with those not getting filled in. When you use the sponge painting method, it does put an extremely light coat on it. So you almost always have to go back over it 2 times, but it dries so quickly that you can actually go over it right after you do it. And if it's a line that's supposed to be left, it's a little deeper scoring than if it's a line that's just for guidance as to placing something. And the reason is that the placement lines, we don't care so much that they show through heavily. You can just, I'm going to turn my light on here so this is a little clearer for you guys. I forgot to do that. You can just, you can see them enough through the paint that it's okay. But if they're a true scoring line that you're going to leave showing, you need to have a little bit more depth so that you don't cover that up. Okay, and the next color I'm going to do is the red, and I'm going to do that because for 2 reasons. 1, there's a lot of it, and 2, red a lot of times needs multiple coats. So I'm going to get the red done, and I'm going to do a mixture of brush painting and sponge painting for the red, because some of the places we need to use it are very small and some of them are very large. So we're going to use a kind of a combination of the 2, and may actually use 2 brushes before we're done too, because I'm going to use, this piece is really large, so I definitely want to use a big brush on that. There are a couple of others that are large enough. I think I'll probably use a big brush on that, use the big brush on them too. This has shiplap scoring going across it, but I'm not going to use the sponge method on it because of its size. So here's 2 things to know. Number 1, if you go across, if you paint across instead of down, it is less likely to settle in. And number 2, when it is, I just got that with those glasses because I've got these crammed on this board so tight. And it's okay, the glasses are supposed to be red, but the sides aren't supposed to be red. I don't want them down the side. So let me get a piece of wet wipe here and clean that off while it's still wet so that it doesn't make a little glob along that edge. So on this, I'm making sure that I go across in the same direction as the shiplap marks, rather than up and down, so that I'm going in the opposite direction. I don't want to do that because it will settle down in much, much more if I do that than if I go across. The other thing is, when there's straight lines like this, you can use your X-Acto knife to clear them if you get paint down in them, if paint settles down in them. So it's kind of a combination of the 2 things. You want to try to do both so that you don't have to use your X-Acto knife on lots of places, but that's always a backup if you need it. If you don't know how to make a paint board, you can check out our Technique Tuesday series. There is one in there about making a paint board. It's not very hard. It's just painter's tape or masking tape on a piece of cardboard. I just use pieces of box that come in. You always want to paint from the middle out so that you don't get paint on those outside edges, because that will keep the paint from being globbed, I guess, on those outside edges as the, okay, the lower part of her is red, and the spacers and the buttons are all things that go on, so you don't have to worry about keeping them clear. And you don't have to come all the way to the bottom. There's a piece that goes along there. So we just have to pay attention up here. And we do want to make sure, you'll notice that's kind of a scallop. We do want to make sure that we get up in there far enough that we got the little points between the scallops. But we want to be careful and not get up on our face. All of this is also red. So these two, there's two pieces here that can be done with the brush, I think. But the rest of that, because of the thinness of it and the small size of the pieces, I think we're going to use a sponge on. And I'm being very careful coming off the top of this that I don't hit the glasses again like I did on that other. While that's kind of drying, oh, Santa. We've got places on Santa that need to have the brush. Santa's outfit and his hat, in both cases, are red. So we're going to paint some red around those edges. Again, we don't have to paint under what's going to be white, just enough to get so that we don't have an edge. And again, we're going to paint from the middle of our piece out to the edges as much as we can. And the top part, we do have to be a little bit careful not to get too far in because of our face. Make sure we stay out there to that edge. Make sure we're getting inside that loop that's of where that painted piece or where that white piece goes. But make sure that we're not getting so far in that we end up on our face. A couple things. I'm going to switch to a sponge in case, so that I hopefully don't need to do as much of my edges. But before I do that, I'm going to find a small brush. With ornaments, the problem up here is that there's almost no way to come on and off of there on both sides. It's just almost no way. So I keep a small brush around that I use to kind of clean out that space in between once I get it filled in. And I always just fill mine in with the color that's at the top, whatever color that might be. Okay, we're going to switch to a sponge. Here we are doing our sponge painting mainly because these are very small and we're never going to keep from getting our brush off an edge, on an edge, I guess would be more appropriate here. When you are doing sponge painting, it is important that you first of all offload your sponge as much as possible and then keep your pressure as light as possible so that you don't have it going down along edges and sides where it's not supposed to go. Okay, that's all I need on that one. So we'll switch them and bring this one back over. We have all of this stuff up here. And that's okay. It won't take very much to get that thing. And we're going to offload our brush as much as possible. And I'll hold it up here so hopefully you can see. You know, can you tell that I have very little paint on that brush? If you don't offload it, you get... It looks more like this. See the clumps of it? So if you offload it by pressing on your palette or paper around your thing until you get most of it off of there, then you lose that and it looks like this. Oops, wrong direction. There. Hopefully you can tell the difference there. So we're just going to lightly go around our glasses and all these little holly berries. And again, red is notorious for needing extra coats, but sponge painting helps with that because it dries so fast. So if we do need to go back across for an extra coat, we'll be able to easily. Though we got lucky on most of our pieces that we painted, I don't think we're going to need extra coats on them. I had a couple spots there that I didn't cover kind of running out of paint over here, but hopefully I'll get it done. Because notoriously I have way too much paint on my palette, so it's kind of nice to have the problem of kind of running out. Okay, next I think we'll do our green, and I'm using a more of a Christmassy green. I think it is called Christmas green, it looks like. For this than I do for a lot of things. I usually use a medium foliage green, but in this case I just think the Christmas green is a better choice. Holly leaves are usually a brighter green, and I'm just going to use a very small brush for this. Now these pieces are the pieces that are the headbands of Mrs. Claus, and they are green, have green leaves, but then they are black in the headband part, so we want to make sure we just keep it on the leaves. The berries will kind of go in the middle here, so it'll help separate, and we don't have to worry about our two colors touching. And even though these are very little pieces, I'm trying very hard to go from the center out. And I'm going back over them a second time with my brush in the direction of that center spine piece to try to get that to stand through without having to use the X-Acto knife. Because I am, as you can tell, I'm going across it, not down it. And so you then have to kind of go back and go down it, and you're best to do that once you've got most of the paint off your brush, and then kind of get a little piece down in there if you can, and those clear out pretty good. And then the larger holly pieces here are foliage pieces, what do you want to call them, they go in this frame here. I'm just gonna try to come from the middle out, same as we always do. And again, the center is our red berry, so we don't have to worry about it. And especially with small things like this, if you keep from getting too much paint on your brush, it will do better. So always try to kind of offload it on the palette and not have a lot of paint on it, because you don't have space to spread that paint out. That's all for that right now, though I'm going to come back. I think I'm going to do my candy cane in green stripe with a little bit of red probably on the white section, but we'll see about that in just a second. Okay, that's it on Santa. So now I'm going to come back and do the stripes here on this candy cane. And stripes on a candy cane are always fun. This one's a really thin. I've got any thinner brushes. Okay, so we're going to get rid of this brush and use this thinner one. You want to get a brush that's a little thinner than the stripe you're doing, preferably. But you don't want it so thin that you end up with lots of little extra stripes in your paint. And then just go along your edge here. And basically you're going to do every other stripe, because you know how a candy cane looks. One stripe's green or red, depending on which kind of candy cane you've got. And one stripe is white. And you may need to turn your palette around. If you do, just do it. I'm doing okay here without turning it around at the moment. We'll see how it goes further down the road. These stripes here don't need to worry about how far in you go. You want to go further than the engraving goes, because they're going to have a hand covering them in that spot. And see, here's where I said I was probably going to end up not being able to do that. I didn't think I could do on that one. I just didn't feel like I could turn my hand. This is a little trick I've kind of learned to do halves all the way down, or at least all the way that are going that direction, and then come back around and do all the halves over there, so you don't have to move your palette constantly. And one thing you do want to do, you don't want to get a whole lot of paint on your brush, because if you do, then it's going to be more likely to spill out over the edges there. And it doesn't really matter which color you started with, whether you start with the green or you start with the white, just go every other after that. Okay. Oh, and the tip and the ends of our rolling pin are green. And actually, I should have done the brown first, because brown's harder to control when you're doing the stain method, and you want to do the stain method in this case to make the name shine through. Or even use a lighter brown, but I didn't grab a lighter brown, so we're definitely going to use the stain method on it. It would be sponge or stain anyway. Neither one of those does great along edges, so I'm going to keep this out for right now. We're going to do the brown next. And in the case of our brown, it is all staining. So you can either stain with an actual wood stain, or there's a great way to stain with acrylic. And it is pretty easy. You're just going to take a wet wipe, and you're going to put a little bit of paint on your palette, and then you're going to dip the edge of your wet wipe. You're going to put your finger underneath it and dip the edge of the wet wipe in the paint so that it kind of ends up being watered down a little bit. And then you're just going to put it on where you want it. And this is not watering. These wet wipes are not real super wet, but that's okay. We can spread it out as we go until you feel like you don't have enough paint on there, and then dip it in again. On this rolling pin, if I had done it before I did the green, I wouldn't have worried about my edges, but I'm going to try to see if I can do it without messing up that edge. So first of all, I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to work my way out to that edge, and I'll just be very careful along those outer edges to make sure I don't get it in the green. And then you just kind of, if you think it's too dark, and I think this is, then I'm just going to take the wet wipe over with where it's not got paint on it, and kind of rub it off there. And get it so that it's the right color. So it kind of, it's got a little bit of a stain on it. In this case, I don't want that much of a stain. And then our buttons need to be stained by using the wet wipe instead of a actual paintbrush or sponge. You get a little lighter coat, so it looks more like a stain and is easier to do than most things that you might try to do to get that brown stain look. Trying to use a stain, most of them require that you let them dry for 24 hours, so you know that makes it really hard to do stained pieces, or even stained looking pieces. These aren't technically stained, they're just stained looking. Now then, let's do the one yellow thing we've got. I'm going to again use a sponge because it's a pretty small piece. And like I said, I cut my sponges into quarters, and you'll see with this one that I've used it before. You can see the green on that end, but I'm going to use the other end of it to use on this. And yellow is another one of those colors. I don't understand sometimes why some of these colors, it's the pigmentation. I know that. I know it logically, but it just doesn't make sense to me as to why it's this color and not another color. But you got to be kind of careful. So you really want to let that dry between so as not to end up pulling off pieces. Okay, now we've got a lot of black and we've got some gray left over here, but it's important that the parts that have stuff that are going to be glued on top of them, we get them pretty soon. And we didn't get all of those really quick, but we will. And I'm going to use a larger piece, a larger brush again. Let's see my one. Because these are pretty big pieces. Now there is a piece that goes on top of this, actually the frame outline, but so I don't have to go all the way to the edge. But with black, it's not a big deal because unless you get big lumps, you don't have to really worry about it. Because if it comes off the edge, it's okay. It's black and the edges are black, so not a big deal, right? So also with black, I can pull out those holes with just a piece of the corners of this brush rather than having to get a whole new brush, because I'm painting black on black. I don't care that I get a little bit of paint in there. In this case, my Santa goes in the middle, so I don't really need to take the time or energy to paint my middle. Just need to paint the outer edges. Then on Mrs. Claus, I have the frame. I also have the headbands. But again, because it's black, I can get by with using the big brush on the headbands. And I'll have to get a sponge or a small brush out for this. Because if I get a little down on the edges, it doesn't really matter. Okay, that looks to be all of my black. So we're just cranking along here. Okay, this is a cookie sheet, so we're going to put a gray on it. And I'm using a Drizzle Grey. I have a kind of a frost gray I like to use on a lot of my grays, but it's a little too clean and light for this. So I'm using the Drizzle Grey for this. I'm not going to use a huge brush on this, even though that larger piece kind of it would work just fine on it. Mainly because it won't work just fine on the smaller piece. For this piece, I'm making sure that I don't get too much paint on my brush, because it's going to go down, because of the fact that I have to go across like this and not off my edges, I'm going to get it down on my sides most likely. And luckily, it's not going to be too important because I can take a wet wipe here and just real quickly, as soon as I get it done, go through and wipe it off and probably get 90% of what I get on the sides, and I can always touch it up if I need to. And there was a reason why I stopped painting that middle piece, because I saw that I was going to end up having my brush go onto this piece, and I didn't really want that to happen. So I started painting this piece so that I can then pull this piece off and use my wet wipe to quickly go along the outside edge and the inside edge. Okay, we'll sit this over here. Go back to doing our the base of our cookie sheet. Again, we're going to work from the inside out, and again, just like with the Santa, with the 2 frames, we don't need to paint the middle because there's going to be a Mrs. Claus there. And it looks like, last but not least, is our little gingerbread man here. And for gingerbread, I love folk art cinnamon. I think it looks just about like perfect gingerbread. Don't have that one. Sable brown will work. Okay, so let's get our little gingerbread guy done first. The only thing on him that's engraved is his heart. And it is a piece that gets attached, so we don't have to worry about it. We also don't have to come off that edge there because we have a hand that goes there. And then we'll get us a little bit of white to do our candy cane, and I think we're done. Again, just don't get too much on your brush when you're doing this because you'll end up with a mess. You know, you can see here I did the trick where you're doing halves. So I'm always doing the half where I'm pulling away from me, because pulling it towards you is sometimes a little harder to control. And with white, a lot of times I come back over because, as we all know, white needs to see. I got a little bit out there. So we're just going to use our wet wipe and take that off. And that was easy to do. Tell you, the ornaments work great. Not only as ornaments, obviously they work great as that. And one of the things I do, or we do in our family, is we have annual ornaments that have the dates on them that our kids get every year. And when they were younger, they got to go buy them and pick them out. But now it's usually mom makes it and sends it to them, now that they're both adults. But they also work great as gift tags. So if you've got gifts that you're wrapping and you want to put something just a little extra on them, you can put one of these ornaments on as a gift tag, and then they actually get kind of 2 gifts in one. They get their gift and they get a free ornament, and you can just write on the backs of them the to and from and the date if you want, the year, so that it's kind of an extra memory. We sell our ornaments in sets that save you a little bit of money, or in individually. So if you don't like all the ornaments in a set, you can buy them individually. They just end up costing you a little bit more because it's a lot more labor intensive to cut just one. We're going to let that dry. I'm going to show you another little trick on how to spruce that up just a little bit here in a minute. But first of all, while we're letting that dry, and we're ready to start piecing things together. So first of all, I'm going to take and show you how to edge. You can use a brush. If you use a brush, you want to make sure that your brush is going from the back to the front, or from the front to the back, that the handle of your brush is towards the back of your ornament. Believe it or not, that's how you make sure you don't get an edge up on top. And the same is true for a acrylic marker. I feel like I have more control with an acrylic marker. Some people feel like they have less control with an acrylic marker. You just basically run along your edges, and that's going to cover up any little paint smudges you have there and make them a lot cleaner looking. But you know, remember, these are handmade, so unless there's a lot around the edges, I don't usually do a lot of trimming. I told you in this case I have kind of a gray shadow on all of this because I got too much off the edges, and so that's why I'm trimming this piece. As I look at these other pieces, I'm not thinking I'm going to need to trim any others, so I don't trim if it's just got a little bit over it. If you use the sponge method on something, it'll just barely have an edge around it, and that's not a big deal. I mean, that's why we use the sponge method, especially on small pieces, because we want to make sure that we don't have to trim those really small pieces. So that's how you trim. And I'm not going to look at the rest of them because I don't think, unless I see one that needs it really bad, we're not going to try to trim that. So now we're just going to take our pieces off and start assembling. Now, I'm not going to sit here and glue them because there's lots of little pieces here and it'll hold a substantial amount of time. And I'm sure you don't want to sit here and watch me glue all these little pieces. I'm just going to lay them all out together the way they need to go so that you can see what they're supposed to look like when you're all done. When you order from us, I encourage you when you first get your order to get it out and look at each of the products in your order and piece together the pieces before you start painting anything. Make sure that you have all of your pieces and that none of them are broken. She's going to have hair up there, but I'm going to put a little bit of white paint on that. And I'm actually going to use this wet wipe to do it because it's just easier. I try to keep my circles at the tops as close to possible matching whatever's right below them, and this is going to get hair pieces put over the top of it. That's why I'm using the white on it. But you lay it out when you get the pieces. When you get the kit, you lay the pieces out unpainted. And then I strongly suggest you lay them out again painted, just to make sure that you get all the right pieces with the right product, especially when you're doing one of these kind of kits where it's a big stack of a stack, you know, a section of multiple ornaments. Because, like, see all of those different berries? They're all slightly different sizes, so you need to make sure you get the right ones on the right things. You always want to check your pieces because you're going to find out here in a minute that I am missing a piece. I keep looking for it and it's not showing up. That's okay. I can cut a new one in a little bit. So you're going to get to see it without that piece on it. I think those are the hearts. If you watched my gingerbread set the other day, you'll notice I was missing some hearts. I think those may be them because there are no hearts on this that I can see. So we'll see when we start putting it together. Okay, this board is about gone, so we're going to take the tape off the other one. You'll notice I use my boards over and over. I just laid that other one aside because it's still got plenty of sticky on it. I use my boards multiple times so that, number one, it's more economical. Number two, I don't have to constantly be making a board. And last but not least, they get less sticky as you go, and when they first first put them out there, they're a little too sticky. Okay, our heads are going to be an issue here because there's 3 of them and they're slightly different sizes. Let's see if we can get them in the right places. Oh, that was actually easier than I thought it was going to be. I don't know, on the black you might be able to see this. Can you see? Yikes. Can you see where the little... See the outline there? You can see the outline there. Those are the outlines you're left with when you paint over stuff, so that you can tell where things go, but it's not so bad that if you don't get them exactly right, it doesn't cause a problem. So, okay, and then we've got our white lace piece here that goes here with our piece that goes underneath. And where did our frame go here? And our frame goes on that. That she ends up sitting down right along the bottom of there with that frame edge. Our rolling board goes there. Notice that the rolling pin has a name on it. These are personalized if you order them with a name on them, so make sure when you order them that you enter the name that you want on those edges. Now these don't go quite out to the edges, there's a line which shows you where they line up, so you want to make sure you get that right. And then put your pieces in. This goes here. That one does not go there. So I think that I'm missing a piece there. Nope, there it is. And then our hair, we have 4 of those too. Make sure that those are in the right places. One of the reasons I like the Precision Art glue is that it is really good for giving you just a little bit of wiggle room when you put it down. So that if you get it in the wrong spot, it's okay. You got a little bit of wiggle room to get it moved to where you need it. And this is where I said I was missing a piece. I think that actually I just have a wrong piece, because this piece is obviously not the right size for that. So I'm not sure what that goes with. I'll have to look around and see where that goes. Okay, this one goes on top of this spacer. Oh yes, and I told you I was going to do a little trick with this, didn't I? I'm going to put a little bit of red on it. I don't know about you, but I've seen candy canes that are green and white but have a red stripe in the middle of the white. So that's what we're going to try to do. So I'm using an acrylic paint pen, and I'm kind of making sure it's loaded but not overloaded, because I want a really thin line here. So we're going to just go right about the middle of each of these, and that did not turn out very thin. I pushed too hard. Middle of each of these, but see, I'm just going to match them up with a little bit of a line, and it should have a little bit of a curve to it. Hopefully you're better at drawing lines than I am. And that goes on here also. Do not do what I just did. Put your finger down on it while the acrylic marker is still wet. So first we're going to have to kind of repaint our white. And I will have to put that other stripe on there a little bit later once the white has had time to dry. Because if I try to put it on now, it's just going to bleed really bad. And we have our hands. Again, you need to make sure your marker's dry. Mine is not, so I'm being very gentle there. Our hands here. And I don't know if you noticed, there were 2 spacers that went there. They don't need to be painted. Here, I can pick them up because they're not glued right. See the little spacers? They say spacer on them. That's where they go. There's holes on there's circles on the main piece for them. And then these, again, make sure we get the right ones on the right person. Then all of them she has a headband that has holly leaves on the end of it. So we're going to put those on all of them. Looks like I may be missing one of those too. Boy, I'm just having a really good time this week. This is kind of what happens when you do too many kits at once. You end up losing pieces across other kits. That's okay. Well, I have the benefit of being able to cut them tonight or tomorrow. You don't, so make sure that you do it so that you're not missing it. Make sure you check them as soon as you get them. And then all of our little holly leaves. Okay, the two biggest ones go on these guys. These aren't holly leaves, are they? They're holly berries. And then we're going to do, it looks like the medium ones go on these three guys. Got all the parts missing. It's all on one. All the missing parts are on one. That one's not quite as big. So I think it's this one goes on here. And then this one's going to go on that one, which I'm going to have to reprint. So that's our Mrs. Clauses all laid out, I guess. And like I said, I would lay them out like this before you start gluing, just to make sure that you know what matches where and you don't end up gluing. If you watched, I don't remember which one it was, the snowman, I think. I glued the wrong piece on one. And you avoid that by doing this layout like I just did. So those are all laid out. Now we'll do our Santas. We only have 2 Santas. That'd be a little bit easier. Our Santas, however, have all these little eyebrows. I hate the little eyebrows. This one, the eyebrows are built into the piece, so they're not as bad. I told you could have painted the her eyebrows if you wanted. I like mine like that. But one thing I do like to do when I have eyes is I do like to paint them. And I again like to use my acrylic marker. Just seems to be the easiest way to do it for me. And just fill in the little circle here. And you could do it in any color. I probably didn't even think about it until just now. Maybe a light blue would have been, a pretty blue would have been pretty. Because, you know, Santa's eyes really aren't black, but that's okay. That way they'll pop a little bit under those other layers that are going up around them. So I'm going to move, because I didn't glue these yet, right? So I'm going to move that out of my way and do this here too. Okay, and then he gets his mustache and his nose and the little ball on his hat. The balls are not perfectly round, so you may have to twist them around a little bit to get them to line up right. Okay, same thing here. We're going to do our beard, and there's our hat brim. In this case, our eyebrows are separate, so that you see they're these little bitty pieces. And actually, I would probably do, if I'm gluing, I would do them before I did my hat brim. This goes down here along the bottom. Get our mustache again. And our nose. And this one, to give it a little more interest, has a star up here, and there's a button. Where'd he go? Right here. And that just kind of goes on the star, like that. And then we have our holly to go on the top and bottom of the frame, just like we did on Mrs. Claus. Okay, and there we go. So they're all laid out. If you were making them, then now at this point you would start picking up and gluing pieces on. I usually start at the top and glue each piece on as I go, and then eventually I'm down to that bottom layer. So I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. There's links to the 2 sets of ornaments in the description, and I hope you'll come back and join us soon if you haven't already. I hope that you will press the subscribe and the little bell so that you get notified when we load a new video to our YouTube channel. We're trying really hard to do some more, so subscribe and check us out.